Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the preview to the ClassicsToday.com Insider Special Feature, Sviatoslav Richter's 10 Best Recordings. If you're a piano maven, then you know Richter, and if you want to know what his 10 best recordings are, hop on over to ClassicsToday.com and have a look if you're an insider subscriber. If you're not, please feel free to sign up. There are lots of ways to do it. It's easy. It's worth every penny. You're going to love it. And there's a link right below that will tell you where to go to take a look. In the meantime, let's have a little chat about Mr. Richter, with some recommendations too. Not the 10 best, but just some suggestions for listening. You know, what is it about misery that we so admire? That's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Richter. It's not that he was notably more miserable than other people, but he was definitely quirky. He was a romantic artist, a Byronic character, sunk in inner contemplation and melancholy. We admire artists who somehow live the difficulty of their art. Those who think that it's agony, that it's this intensely romantic, personal expression of their innermost being, who are never satisfied, and whose work shows that, because they can be either very hot or very cold. And we prefer that. We prefer that because when they're on, that evidences some sort of inspiration, some inner communion with, the deity, or with the mysterious creative wellspring from which all art, emerges. And that's what we want in our art, at least some of us do. I have to confess, I'm not one of those people. I understand, I admire the great art, I admire great interpretation, just like anybody else does. But I also admire artists who evince some kind of joy, who show us how much fun they're having, who perhaps, dare I say it, don't take themselves all that seriously. I mean, they should. What they're doing is serious. It's respectful, after all. It's respectful of us as audiences when they take themselves seriously. They take us seriously. Of course they do. I'm not belittling these tougher characters. What I find somewhat questionable is our automatic assumption that the more miserable and bleak they are, the better they must be, the more serious they must be, the deeper they must be. Because one of the great sort of meaningless terms in art, in my view, is depth, profundity. What is it? 99% of the time, our evaluation of just how deep and serious an artist is has nothing to do with musical results. It has to do with the afflatus that surrounds the musical results. How crazy their life is, their ridiculous statements about art, their proclamations, their verbiage, their PR, in other words. That's what tells us whether something is deep. The actual music making between an artist, two great performances, one from an artist who is just, an agonizing, miserable, brooding, narcissistic, navel-gazing, whatever, and somebody who seems to be having a normal, happy life and who's enjoying themselves. And how do you tell the difference from one kind of depth and another kind of depth, or profundity, or, God forbid, sublimity? Ooh, yeah. I mean, who knows? Really, who knows? So Richter was one of those guys. He was one of those guys who had, on the one hand, this enormous idea of the depth and profundity and spirituality and all those things of what he was doing. And on the other hand, who didn't give a damn about his legacy, about his recordings, about when he got recorded, what got released, about the people who were following him, all the people who were worshiping them. If anything, he held them in contempt. And the more contemptuous he was, of course, the more he was admired, which I think is just sick, but that's the way it is with these people. They amass a cult following, they become worshipped uncritically. Richter made a lot of really bad recordings. He really did, because he didn't care. And in that respect, he was a little bit contemptuous of his audience, I think. I really think he didn't necessarily respect the people who were giving him or his labels money to get his best effort every time. there are other artists who really did care and do care more than he did. And so I'm not trying to cast aspersions on him to say he was a bad artist or anything like that. It's not a personal thing. It's just a question of the fact that this amazingly talented, incredibly gifted artist that he was an amazing pianist. And when he was in his prime of his life and his form, was absolutely astonishing and worthy of his reputation, for sure. But on the other hand, it's very difficult to find out what his best recordings are because there is a lot of junk. And there's junk that shouldn't be there because he should have taken better control of it. For all that these artists tend to be terribly self-indulgent and reflective. It's amazing how little they seem to be concerned with the quality of some of the results. But anyway, I say this all as a prelude because that means that the 10 best recordings are going to be rather interesting to find. But until we get to that, for those subscribers over at ClassicsToday.com, I do want to tell you about what is probably the best, least expensive, easiest to deal with way to get a rounded picture of Richter. And that's this box, this Deutsche Grammophon box that's called Pianist of the Century. Modest title, right? I mean, yeah, okay, it's silly. We know that. But this is a 9-disc set of some really, really good stuff. There are some bow wows in here too, obviously. But it begins with Schumann, which was something that Richter always did enormously well. Let's take the discs out, and I'll tell you what's on them. And generally, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, not all of these are going to make the top 10. In fact, most of them don't. I'm telling you right now, but some of them do. And you can go find out which ones they are. Anyway, here we go. Disc number 1 is Schumann, the March in G minor, the Waldszenen, which he always did wonderfully well. And although he never played all of them, I don't think he plays all of them here, does he? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, I think he does them. Anyway, here. And then the Sechsstücke aus Fantasiestücke, Opus 12. Now, Richter, you see, the thing about Richter is that he almost never did complete anythings. He always did selections, even from larger works, or larger works meant to be heard complete. He would be very capricious about that. And that was something that older pianists always did. When Clara Schumann played Carnival, she never played her particular portrait in Carnival. She always left things out, and people did excerpts, and pianists did what they wanted. He was one of those. He did what he wanted, and that was that. Then we have Mozart Piano Concerto number 20 in D minor, and the Prokofiev 5th Piano Concerto. Now, the Prokofiev is fabulous. The Mozart is okay. Rachmaninoff's 2nd Piano Concerto. This is all in 1 disc. Oh, and 6 preludes, pardon me. Really, really, very, very, very fine. One of Richter's good ones. And it's a beautiful performance of the 2nd, and we'll talk about that again when we talk about his 10 best recordings, because I will give you a hint. The Rachmaninoff 2 is there. Yes, it is. That's a teaser, as they call it in the business. And then we've got, let's see, Haydn. Oh, Haydn's Piano Sonata in G minor. Richter always did Haydn piano sonatas, and wonderfully so. Good for him. Chopin's Ballade number 3, Debussy preludes, a couple of preludes, and Prokofiev's 8th Sonata, which he sort of owned. He really, really did. And then we've got, let's see, Tchaikovsky's 1st Piano Concerto with Karajan, the Wiener Symphoniker, not even the Berlin Philharmonic. Oh, this is famous. They didn't get along. It's not very good. No, it's not. Let's see. Then we have Beethoven, the 3rd Piano Concerto and the Rondo in B major, Opus Posthumous. This is with Kurt Sanderling. And let's see, what's the orchestra here? The Wiener Symphoniker. This is not a great Beethoven 3rd. Sanderling could be really very, very stodgy, and that was one of his stodgiosity performances. It's just heavy and not very interesting. Then we've got this recital where you've got some Chopin stuff, the Polonaise Fantasia number 7, a couple etudes, the Ballade number 4, ooh, yeah, and Debussy's Estampe and Scriabin's 5th Sonata, a terrific recital, absolutely first rate. And finally, Bach, 3 preludes and fugues from the Well-Tempered Clavier, works that Richter played all the time and very distinctively, I might add. His complete Well-Tempered Clavier, one of the few things he did complete, is famous. And then we've got the Schubert Allegretto in C minor and the Ländler in A major, and then Schumann's Abegg variations. Absolutely fabulous. His Opus 1, the Rachmaninoff Prelude and G-sharp minor, Opus 32, number 12, and Prokofiev, a couple Vision Fugitive, Opus 22, numbers 3, 6, and 9. A wonderful recital also. So this gives you a fairly good conspectus of Richter's work. There are, like I said, some things that are less good, but most of it's really quite good, and you're not going to hear better because Richter, if you get other boxes of things, unless you get selections, because there's like Richter was everywhere. You've got the complete Warner things, which are, 50-50, and you've got, what's this thing here? This is the big Decca Philips DG box. It has all of this DG stuff that I just talked about. Is it this big cube, which I don't think is even around anymore. But what is this? It says like stripes. Yeah, okay, look at it that way. Again, it's like 50-50. And then there's like Richter everywhere. There's Richter in Prague. Here's Richter in Hungary, 1954 to 1993, 14 CDs, some of which are marvelous, but it's all music he did elsewhere. And I'm not one of those people who likes to go trolling through multiple versions of the same thing endlessly, looking for one is better than the one from this day, from last week, or I have no patience for it. I expect my artists to do their best work and to do it the first time and not to have to come back and do it again. I know I'm crazy, especially these days because there's so much duplication of everything by everybody. But just in order to get you going, if you're a Richter curious person, try this. Try this. Even the stuff that isn't very good will give you a sense of who he was. Because when he wasn't very good, he usually wasn't very good in a particular way. That is, he was always very virtuosic. I mean, his technique usually stayed in place until he got this last decade or so. But he could be very stiff, very unyielding, very austere. Again, the fun kind of disappeared. Earlier on, there wasn't much fun either, but there was a fluidity and a virtuosity and ease of utterance that at least made up for it. And you hear that in most of these performances. You really do. So there you go. That's your foretaste of Sviatoslav Richter. And go over and have a look at his 10 best recordings. See if you have them. See if your list agrees with my list. There's a lot of controversy about what those recordings are. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.